Today we sit down with Rochelle Mutton, an occupational therapist, CEO and founder of Motivate Kids, and a passionate advocate for helping children feel safe and capable in their everyday lives. Today, Rochelle will share with us a bit about her personal journey and her professional journey, focusing on culture, values, and how she recently received the In Daily Social Impact Award.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning, Rochelle, on our podcast. To start, we just wanted to ask a bit about your personal journey and what led you to start your business that you have today.
Thank you for having me. So I studied occupational therapy at uni and spent the first part of my career travelling over to America and the UK and working as an OT over there. And when it was time to come back to Adelaide, really understanding, I guess, that international view of child development and how therapy could be delivered was a big passion area. So for those who might not know what occupational therapy is, I work within just paediatrics, so that's supporting children who may have a diagnosis like autism or ADHD, but it's also working with a lot of children who are just experiencing some challenges in the moment. So it might be anxiety or tricky transitioning into school or high school, and a lot of that well-being and resilience, particularly in the society that we're living in today. So my journey has really been around supporting parents when they would say, if only I knew earlier, or I should have trusted my gut, or my doctor told me my child would grow into it. So it's being able to provide that support for the child and family, but walk alongside them. And it might be in things like how do they get dressed in the morning, or are they able to play and make friends at school, or even things like handwriting. So we cover such a big scope. And for me personally, it was being able to, when I came back to Adelaide from overseas, design a business or design a service that could meet those families where they were at. So it could really pivot to meeting their needs rather than being stuck in a specific service model.
Well, you mentioned you had international experience. Was that one of maybe a few reasons or factors that impacted your business that you have today?
Absolutely. So I went overseas and studied in California, and the passion and driving force behind that was to really understand why the therapy that I was doing in Adelaide was effective. So being able to understand what's happening in the brain and the body of our children. So experiencing what the model looked like in America, experiencing then what it looked like in the UK, it gave a really great lens to then come back to Australia and design a service that could be really agile to what the families needed, but was still grounded in the science and the research so that we were able to show how we got outcomes. So our therapists felt really confident in the model of care that they were providing. So I think having that experience early on, and whether it was the environments that those studios looked like overseas, or if it was how you would work with different families. So sometimes you might have been working with the nannies or the carers rather than the parents. It gave you such a rich understanding of how to work with people and connect with people in different ways.
So, Rochelle, are there any other decisions, I guess, that had a large impact on how you've built your business or where you are today?
A few decisions had the biggest impact. When you look back, there was two. The first one was really that ability to back yourself. So coming back from overseas and opening a practice, the first thing I found was actually the property. And that was really inspiring because in London, you're working in the basement and it's dark and it's gloomy, whereas I found a beautiful place in Adelaide that had nice light windows. So the environment was really important for me. The tricky thing was perhaps the timing and not necessarily having financial backing from family or from the bank. So you had to put yourself out there and trust that if you made that leap, you know what direction you're going. You just might not be able to see the floor in that moment. So it was creating that change of I loved working, but being able to be comfortable with the amount of work you had to do because it was your passion area or because you knew what the end goal was and the direction that you wanted to go in. You had no choice. Like you were in, you had to back yourself. And I think that's guided a lot of the decisions that we have made across the last eight or 9 years, that We understand the information that we had at the time, backed ourselves, and then found the people along the way to be able to support us in getting to where we needed to be. And I think the second biggest impact was connection. So as occupational therapists, or even as humans, we're wired to connect. There's this beautiful social, relational connection that happens. It's so subconscious, like it's in the brain, it's in the body. You get that feeling of being together. And we're a society that's quite tribal. So connecting with people that could support along the journey was massive. And that was everything from doing super early morning networking with people that weren't even in my profession to build that brand, or, taking Subway platters to GPs to try and get them to understand what OT was and refer to us, or working with different schools in different ways. So it was being able to have those connections and understand how you could work together with different businesses, because everyone has a child, or everyone knows someone who has a child. And it's when families get to that point where maybe a childcare worker or a teacher says, have you noticed that your child finds this tricky, or are you seeing this happening at home? You want the people that are around the child to know what to do next, rather than to just wait it out. So I think building those connections and helping society understand what OT is has been a really big driving factor in how we've designed Motivate Kids.
That's excellent. And you mentioned as well around, building those connections and building that environment. I guess one of the other things we always hear a lot in businesses is around culture and building culture. It's quite hard to actually build a really good culture in an organization. So what principles, I guess, have guided how you've shaped your culture within your team and your business?
Culture's a beautiful thing. It's a very dynamic thing. And I think looking back over the years, I've definitely learned a lot about culture. And what comes to mind that's always the grounding point or the fulcrum is the why. And the culture within OT, we are a profession of individuals that are drawn to being to the helping profession. So there's a certain type of personality that just wants to come in and care. And it's the type of care and support that's not, I'm coming in, I'm the expert, let me fix you, or let me solve this problem. It's the type of care and partnership that you walk alongside the parents or the children, and you empower them in that journey. So that really stems back to, what's your occupational therapist's why? Why are you doing what you should do, and why should anyone care? So you've got to have that really strong and embedded in who you are, because that's what gets you out of bed every day, and it makes work not feel like work. So the metaphor that comes to my head is almost like a seesaw. Think about a seesaw. As a child, a playground, we've all been on a seesaw, or we've seen one. And that fulcrum really is the why. It's the grounding part. But on each edge of that seesaw in OT and with culture, I really see that we've got this beautiful heaviness that's almost an honour and a privilege, that we do get to work with families and parents in their most trickiest times. They're with you when their child's struggling, they're struggling, they might not know what to do, and what they share with you is really vulnerable. So it's quite a privilege to be in that, but that is quite heavy for the profession to carry. So that has an influence on culture. But then the other side of the seesaw, you've got that lightness, you've got the little things that make the biggest difference. When a child's able to ride their bike, or they're able to get dressed in the morning, or they're able to do their homework, or they made their first friend. So you get all those celebrations and the excitedness that happens as a therapist. But you also get it in your team. So you have the therapists who are wanting to play table tennis at the end of the day before they go home because they love it. Or they're doing a giant obstacle course for Easter and an egg and spoon race. So you get that lightness within the therapy team, as well as that interaction they have with their clients. And I think culture's that paradox, that it's not heavy and it's not light. It doesn't have to be either or. It's the and it is going to tilt throughout the day. Some days are heavier than others. But I think one thing that our team does beautifully is we have some really nice rhythms in place where we get to pause and reflect and look at what were the things that were really great this term and what were the things that we were able to grow through, and then what would we do differently. And that filters from the top down. So our executive leadership team do that, our clinical leadership team do that, and we bring on board our therapy team. And I think when that filters really organically and you've got a natural cadence and you can hold the heaviness and the lightness and be grounded by that why, where I'm at in my journey so far, that's probably where I would describe what that culture looks like and how important it is.
That's great, Rochelle. And they usually say that, guiding principles and values go hand in hand. So as a leader, how do you ensure that your values, I guess, consistently are shown as you build your business?
Yes. Great question. I remember at the very beginning when we sat down with a business coach and the therapist and office team at Motivate Kids, and we set our 3 values at the very beginning. And that was a beautiful process to go through, because when you're a therapist or you're in a profession where you do a job, whether you're a baker or, something like that, you are so great at what you do being on the tools, but learning about business isn't something you think about. You just think, yes, I love doing this, so I'm going to start a business. Yeah. But definitely being able to work out what your values are was a big piece of that at the beginning. So our first 3 values were connection, consistency, and integrity, and they held true for so many years, and they're still very well seen in our business today. But when the business started to grow and more therapists joined our team and a bigger structure happened, we actually redid our values last year, and it was a really empowering process for us and our team. The values haven't been released to the world yet. They're just internally, and we've been able to really embed them into our cadence, into our different rhythms. And what's really interesting is we've interviewed some parents, got their reflection on their journey at Motivate Kids and how organically they use our values in how they would describe us. Probably for me means that we've captured that so beautifully. So we've got, child first always, where everything revolves around that child. Every decision we make from the office team, from the therapists, or how we speak with parents, it's always around putting that child at the heart. It's the little things is our second value. So it is the little things of if a family arrives early, that therapist is going to start their session because they know the child finds it tricky waiting in the waiting room. Or our office team remember that a grandparent's coming over, or you've just been on a holiday. So they're able to have those conversations and build that connection through the little things. And for our team, it's we, not me. So even with table tennis rallyings, yes, we're a very competitive bunch and someone likes to win, but it is that team sport where they're practicing and they're getting ready for the next rally together. And they do that we, not me in so many different ways, how they learn together. So if they do trainings, they're wanting to share that organically with each other, because when one rises, they all rise. And I think that's where when you're a client at Motivate Kids, you're getting your lead therapist, but you're getting the whole team. So if a therapist is away, our families will see another therapist who's able to step in because we're so connected and we're so collaborative with that value. And our last value is above and beyond. So it's really about, we see that in so many ways, how our therapists go above and beyond when they're working with their clients or with the team. And we believe that above and beyond really comes back to the innovation as well. So it's not just around let's continue the service model that we developed when I first opened Motivate Kids, because the landscape changes, funding body changes, but research also changes. So we do need to go above and beyond and keep learning and changing and adapting. And that takes a really strong culture to be able to have that resilience through change and that change management. So I think your values, yes, you can put them on the wall in a beautiful frame, but when they're shown in how your therapists, interact with each other, how the office team works so seamlessly to support our therapists, It's a really heartwarming moment when you get to step back as the business owner and watch all of that unfold naturally and organically. So it's a very humbling and heartwarming experience when you get that right.
So, Rochelle, over your time, you mentioned the business is 8 to 9 years old. What have been some of the more challenging periods in your journey, and I guess what helped you work through those challenges?
Great question. I could probably write a book on the different chapters, and each chapter would have different challenges and the different, insights and the lightness that goes along with that for sure. I think within the OT profession, the allied health profession, our biggest challenge at the moment really is the funding bodies. It's the NDIS price freezes for, 7 or 8 years, and how do we adapt our service model to continue providing the quality of care that we believe every child should experience, but your funding prices are completely capped. So it definitely makes owning a small business and private practice more challenging. But I think that's where we've been able to use that above and beyond value and work out how do we provide therapy in a different way that still supports a lot of the children that we do look for. I think one of the biggest things when you think about challenges and that connection that's so important has been finding the right people along the way to support when different challenges come up. And I've always believed that there's people come into your life for a reason, a season, and a lifetime. And sometimes those business consultants or coaches or just someone that you've crossed paths with come in with a set of skills that can help you with that challenge in the moment. And I've had so many throughout Motivate Kids. I say so many, probably a couple that I can count on my hand that have really been able to support me grow as a business owner or learn a new skill to understand or a new framework to put into practice. But I've also had to learn that when those consultants do share input or share their expertise, you've really got to filter that through your lens, that not everything they share with you want to put into practice straight away. And I think that's the biggest thing for any business owner is that you are the expert in your business. You've just got to find the right people that are able to help you with that challenge, filter it through, and then trust that, you've got all the information you can in the moment and make the decision based on that. I think hindsight's a great thing. And when we look back, we could go, oh, I wish I could have, I should have. And I think that cycle, that mindset cycle can be really toxic for a business owner, where you do have to trust that you made the best decision you can and you were able to bring your team along with that through those different challenges. And that builds your team's resilience. You're able to build leaders within the team when they understand why you've made decisions that you've made and bringing them along the journey. So I think a lot of those challenges, whether they're funding body challenges, whether it's just working out how do we work with schools now? Schools are so busy with what they need to do supporting their students as teachers, but what about all these allied health that are wanting to come in and provide support within their environment? So schools are having to work with therapy providers to look at what is the best model of collaboration and partnership so that, again, you keep the child first always, so that child, that student, but how does the teacher and the OT work together to be able to support that child? And it's an exciting time right now with designing that. But it's also a time where, you need that trust and that understanding between, what's the teacher's priorities and their scope and their skills, what's the therapist, and then how do you walk alongside that together? So lots of challenges, and I think there always will be, but being able to, have those people that can walk alongside you and that sort of system thinking to filter what is it for us right now that's right for us to implement, and then trusting yourself, your gut, your team, and rinse and repeat and go again.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And obviously you've been able to overcome those challenges because you recently won the Social Impact Award, which firstly, congratulations. But has there been moments for you where you realised that the work you were doing was having a broader impact than maybe you initially expected?
Definitely more than I initially expected. Starting Motivate Kids, it was me and one other therapist, and so focused on doing the therapy, loving the therapy. That's all I knew, and that's what I loved doing. I actually never thought that owning a business meant you employ lots of staff as well. It's funny when you think back now, but having more staff also then meant obviously now a bigger impact that we can have. But back at the very beginning, we were focused on what we were doing. I found people who loved doing what I love doing, and we did what we loved alongside each other, and it worked organically. We learnt together, we grew together. But as new people would join the team, that complexity communication blew out of control. So, you've got 2 communication lines or 4 communication lines between you and someone else. And then when you've got 4 people in the team, there's like 16 communication lines. Then when you get like 20 in the team, there's like 170 communication lines. And then when you've got 40 in the team, there's like 800 communication lines. So that was where I started to understand how important a system was and building systems. And I always think about, your first job in the world and how that shapes you. And for me, it was McDonald's, like many. And it was phenomenal because you knew the systems, they were there for a reason. And I think I've now found the beauty in the systems, and it's that paradox again, where a system is so structured, but when you've got the structure of the system, you've then got the flexibility in how therapists can work with children, show their flavour and their therapy styles because the system supports them. So that's been, a really important, I guess, takeaway with the impact that we have, because that system allows more people to come together, work as a team, and then you're able to have more consistent impact at the quality that you know that every child and family deserve. And then therapists feel really great around the quality of service that they're providing. So it creates a really nice cycle, and that therapist then wants to go and learn more and do more professional development, and the families benefit from that. So it's, the Social Impact Award was definitely a beautiful moment in time, but it does reflect the impact of the whole team. So was very grateful, very honoured and humbled, and very surprised, particularly when you've been working for so many years, head down, bum up, that you just don't expect that happens. So it was a nice moment to, lift our heads, look around, gain that perspective, and now we're almost head down, bum up again, and away we go.
Rochelle, in your industry, strategic focus is often critical to long-term success.
Yes.
And you spoke earlier around some of the challenges you've, anticipated. So how do you actually anticipate challenges, and how do you prepare for them whilst, keeping the bigger picture in mind?
Great question. I think of this one like using Google Maps when you're on a journey. So we all know our why. We know the destination. The destination's not an end game when you're working in OT. It's not, going to get to the finish line and you go, yes, we've achieved that. Like, it is an endurance, a marathon, not a sprint. But if you think about Google Maps and it routes you where you want to go, I think when you're on that journey, we as a team and as a leadership team, you're looking through the front mirror. You're looking, knowing what your strengths are as a team. Sometimes you need to check the rear view mirror and your side mirrors just to see where you're at. And I think that's where, for us, when we think about strategy, we look at what's happening within the world of NDIS or different funding bodies, or what's happening in the world of best practice and service models. But we also want to keep looking through the front windscreen, because that's the way that you are going. When you think about strategy, and Google Maps happens to me all the time, it changes the route. You start one way and then it goes, no, go that way. You're going to save a few minutes. And so you've got to be able to decide or have the skill to know, when do I actually need to pivot and we take, this exit off the highway versus continuing. And so I think it's important when you have strategy that you've got a few different anticipated exits or routes ahead that you can take, so that you're not just streamlined for this is where we need to go and we have to get there. And if we don't get there, we haven't been successful as a business. I think there's as much success in being able to pivot and tailor to the journey you're on. And then you experience something that you didn't even anticipate that you would experience because you took that detour. So that when we think about strategic focus, that metaphor really aligns with where we're at the moment. The last thing with strategic focus that I'm very well known for is the idea of having a parking bay. So we have lots of ideas that come up at Motivate Kids, whether they're therapists having ideas for new groups or things to do in the school holidays or different assessments, or you might have marketing having ideas for different events, or I have different ideas of let's do this. There are lots of ideas that sometimes just need to sit in the parking bay. It's not that they're not important. It's not that they're not worth pursuing, but right now with the journey that you are on, they just need to sit there. So we definitely have a full parking bay and many lined up ready to, join the tour with us. But right now, I think it is just being able to focus what's happening on through your windshield, and being able to focus, on your game with the awareness of what's happening, on the journey that you're on.
So, Rochelle, as your business has evolved over the past 8 to 9 years, as you mentioned earlier, Elliot, how has your approach to strategy and planning changed?
It's a great question. Again, as a therapist, you go into opening your own business thinking you're just doing therapy without realizing that there are these other things that come along during the way, like strategy. I remember within my vocabulary, payroll tax wasn't even a thing. I didn't know what BAS was. You used to get refunds and you're like, this is great. And then it changed that you had to pay and you're like, I don't understand this anymore. So there was this massive learning curve from that sort of financial IQ and to understand. And I think from a strategic side as well. So at Motivate Kids, we decided last year to have an advisory board. And I think being able to find the people that are on your board to be able to bring their wisdom from their different sectors has really helped us look at what our strategy is. So understanding what our strengths are as a business, our weaknesses, what are the opportunities out there and the threats and trends. It's really powerful when you do that with your executive leadership team, with your clinical leadership team and those experts that come on as well, so that they help you come and work out, okay, this is route A, B, and C, so that you know when you need to exit it as well. But they're also a really great addition to be able to help you, challenge your thinking, or to be able to ask you questions the why, until you really get to that point of this is why this strategy is important for our families, why it's important for our therapists, and how that works as a community. Because I think as therapists, you can focus, and we focus so much on that one child, but that one child lives within a family and that family lives within a community. And so the strategy really needs to look at that bigger perspective as well, so that you do have that impact, and so that therapists do have those lightness moments where you get to experience and share in the excitement with families, because you are creating impact and that sustained change.
So, Rochelle, thank you very much for your time this morning. Just before we, close our vodcast, for founders and emerging businesses, particularly here in South Australia, what advice would you offer about building a business and something that is sustainable long term?
Great question. And I think it goes back to having your why. So to have that sustainable business long term, you have to have your why as that business owner, because you need to show up when everyone else goes home, or on a public holiday, or on the weekend, or the Christmas closure, because there are things that you're going to have to do that no one else can do. So you've got to have that why. And it's not always about working longer hours and working harder, but working out how to work smarter so that you can work in alignment. So I think when you have that why, you're then, back to the seesaw analogy, able to have that on one side of it, that that paradox of structure. You're able to have a system that supports you in getting to your why, but then you can also have the freedom as to what that looks like. So I think being able to find that structure and freedom and implement that into your business and make sure that everyone in your business understands that. Because if it's only understood at the top, you know, the people within the different layers of the business, they're not along the journey with you. They don't understand, you know, how decisions are being made, that they're heard, and they get that input along the way as well. So for me, it's that systems aren't the opposite of freedom. They're really what makes that freedom possible. So when you build the system, you get to design and redesign. It's not set in stone. You get to redesign the service. And I think that's what really creates the sustainable impact for long-term business.
Thank you, Rochelle. We really appreciate your time and your insights that you shared with us. If you want to check out more about our vodcast, please visit our website at elevatemc.com.au or visit our YouTube or Spotify.